Welcome.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone, and thank you so much to all the wonderful filmmakers that I had the pleasure of including in the book. We're gonna spend some time talking about some of the advice in the book, which hopefully you guys have seen, and then we'll talk about some other important documentary pieces of advice, and maybe a little bit about the Oscars, if you guys need some tips on your Oscar pool, and then we'll open it up for questions. How many filmmakers are in the room? I'd love to know. Okay, we got lots of you guys. So I think we'll start with I picked some sort of themes out of the book that some of the filmmakers talk about. So I think we'll just start with that. Rachel Grady.
Yeah.
At the end, you have this one piece in here that you have a lot of exceptionally important advice, like feeding your crew, never have a hungry crew. It's like cardinal
Keep everyone alive.
Very important. But you also, at the end, talk about listening, and how I think that's probably one of the most important things about making a documentary, because you don't always know where you're going. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, a lot of times I feel that people that you're talking to, you're interviewing, will always, they will lead you to the place they're interested in. You have to follow their lead. When you try and get them to say what you want them to say, it doesn't work. So, I mean, halfway through, sometimes I've thrown out my hypothesis of what I think this person is going to say, and then the story changes, and that's a good thing. I think the more the story changes, the better. I think that, of course, you're going to go in with your hypothesis, because we're human and that's what we do, but the more you're wrong, the better, because then that's where you're getting into nuance, and if you're learning, everyone's learning. You are the vessel, so you should be confused, and it should be complicated, and it should not be obvious. So listening helps you with that.
And when you're actually interviewing someone, when you sit down in the process of sitting in front of someone, I feel like, I prepare ideas, or I prepare questions. Do you prepare questions? How do you normally, because you have to also listen during your interview to sort of, for follow-up and all of the sort of obvious things, but, how do you change course so quickly, I guess, in the middle?
Well, when I'm doing it depends on the project. For a television project, that's more traditional, I definitely prepare questions. You need to hit certain things. What you're doing something in 5 months, so you can't just be fishing, That said, you should always follow up and just be listening and whatever. But when it's, when you're talking to someone in a sort of verite moment, when you're having sort of a private, they're telling you what they're feeling at the time, or even when two people are talking and you're butting in or whatever. I mean, obviously you can't prepare for that at all. You just, just like you would in any conversation, it's organic. So, and again, you can have your thesis or your hypothesis and try and direct it in that way, and sometimes that's successful and sometimes it isn't, and it's okay if it's not.
The idea, I think about, when I think about documentary, I think about luck a lot, because I feel like I feel like the cardinal difference between making something that's a scripted narrative and something that's a documentary involves this sort of thing out in the universe that you can't always control. And Chris and Penny, you guys, in your advice is so wonderful and sweet, and really speaks to me as someone who makes films, as a partnership as well. Can you talk about luck a little bit in your filmmaking, and how you harness that?
I mean, it always reminds me, when you ask that, of James Carville in The War Room, who quotes a famous golfer who says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And, I think a lot of that is true. But, there is a lot of serendipity that happens. And I guess, I don't think of it more as luck, but you just have to kind of release yourself to kind of follow where the story's going and not anticipate anything, which is a little bit about what you're saying about listening and just, letting real life step in and kind of take you where it takes you. And, maybe it's more faith than luck. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's all luck. Sorry. Well,
it's faith in luck.
I feel like I'm out with a magnifying glass, looking for butterflies, and it's a hurricane going on or something, and you find one, and it doesn't surprise me at all. The best things that have ever happened to me were never planned, and I certainly didn't expect them. If you spend your life with that magnifying glass up around your nose, that's kind of what you find is you're ready to find it, and you do. That's not making a lot of sense. I'm sorry, but I do believe in a kind of luck. I don't, look at calves' livers or anything and try to figure out what's going to happen. But so many things have. In terms of when you have a camera, which is the looking glass of all. When you think you have this device that when you point it at something, it won't lie, unless you trick it. You can trick it, but it won't lie. Well, that never happened before. So you have an instrument that's kind of looking for luck, because it's looking to see. It's like watching a horse race, and you don't know who's going to win, but the camera tells you who wins. It's that kind of luck. That's all I know.
Can you guys think, I guess any of you guys can take this, but in terms of your own filmmaking, when you've been the luckiest, something that you can pinpoint where, you'd be making something and all of a sudden something completely brilliant happened, and you were lucky enough to get it on film.
Luck is good because it's the real thing. You're still committed to reality, to truth. Give an example of what you're talking about. The opening scene in my film Salesman, you begin to get to know Paul, who's having a rough time selling the Bible for $50 to a family that can't really afford a $10 Bible. And the non-sale is just about over when the little girl who's sitting on the lap of the mother who's being pitched gets up, goes over to the piano, and knocks out a tune, which is the perfect semblance of what's going on in Paul's mind. All by chance. Being a good listener, fortunately, I had the difficulty as a child when I was in kindergarten. I got some bad, but maybe turned out to be good advice, and that is, silence is gold, I was told. Silence is gold. So I never said a word. I had to repeat kindergarten. But it took me, it was only until the 6th grade that I began to think of oh my God, I repeated the year.
Al, you talk a lot about empathy in the way that you make work, and it's definitely a piece of your advice in the book. Do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah. Oh, it's love. It's you don't have to be a Buddhist to get the basic element in Buddhism and to practice it, which is kindness. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a person is to represent them properly and with love at some important moment in their life. You can talk about what's happened, but once it's happened, the only way to really know it is for a documentary, to tell it. And to tell it, I dare say, better than if the person had actually been there themselves, because there's a great professional effort made to tell what's really going on, and more so than if you're just sitting in on something. I mean, I'm just in love with the whole art of documentary. And one more piece of advice, which about interviewing. The question that you ask can never be as good as the answer that might have been given without the question. The question turns you in a direction which is not as good as the one that it would have been had it been sparked by its own impetus.
That's also lucky too, when they just take it and you're like, I don't even have to sit here and interview you. You're just gonna tell us all the good stuff. Chris, you were gonna say something about being lucky?
Well, I mean, you know, sometimes lucky is kind of lucky for you and not so lucky for your character, and you know, that happens, I think, a lot in our film, where you're looking for drama. You know, and we had it very specifically in one of the last films we did was called Kings of Pastry, and it was about this French pastry competition where these chefs made everything from these tiny cream puffs to these massive 6-foot sugar sculptures, and then they had to carry them quite a long distance to the display tables, and they're very fragile, so, you know, of course one breaks, and, you know, I was very lucky to have it kind of just come down and just dissolve. Basically, when it hit the floor, it almost just turned into sugar again in front of me. But, you know, it was lucky for me, but it was not lucky for the person I'm filming, which always, you know, creates, you know, kind of a horrible dilemma for yourself as a filmmaker, because, you know, you're happy and sad at the same time. But you know, in the end, it turned out to be a very, you know, lucky thing for my character. So, you know,
You got the girl.
that was lucky. Good. But no, that was a different character. But this one got the prize anyway. So you know, it turned out to be lucky. But it can be something that you know, has a lot of moral dimension for it as a filmmaker.
I feel like also when you're making a documentary, you really are going on a journey, and you're not exactly sure where, you know, the beginning, you know where the beginning is, you know where you started, but you're not exactly sure where you might end. And I hear a lot of documentary filmmakers, and in talking about the book a lot, we talk about sort of your passion for your subject. And, you know, I've heard filmmakers say they've worked on films for 10 years, and which is, you know, unbelievable to me. But Sam, one of the things that you really bring up in your piece is about passion and being passionate about something, and sort of retaining that almost childlike fascination or passion for your subject. Can you talk about keeping that passion through your process?
For me personally?
Yeah, and you personally.
All the films I make are basically come out of a intense curiosity or almost an obsession. So there are times when making a film is a huge chore and a drudge, and I think that if you don't have a kind of obsession or deep interest or something that draws you or something under your skin about the subject, it's hard to keep going in those tough times. So all of my films in some ways have been a joy to work on, because for one reason or another I'm obsessed with all the subjects. And the thing the advice was just a recycling of a Walter Murch quote, which I've always loved, which is something I don't remember it verbatim, but the key to happiness is doing what you love to do when you were between 6 and 9 years old, which I think there's really something to that. And in the piece, I just related how in some ways I'm doing exactly what I did at that age as like a kind of obsessive, nerdy researcher. I'm just making films instead of making drawings. So.
I got my first camera when I was 8 years old.
There you go.
I couldn't afford it, so I thought I'd never get a camera. But I was in a hardware store, and I got a brand new one for 35 cents.
A movie camera?
Was it a movie camera?
Not a movie camera, but it's in the right direction.
Do you remember the pictures you took with that camera?
It's mostly family pictures.
The Sam makes live documentaries. You want to say a little bit about what they are?
Yeah, I've lately been making these, what I call live documentaries, which is all the elements of a regular film, except it just happens live. So there's a film on the screen, and I narrate it in person, and a band does a live soundtrack. So it's a movie, but it just happens live, and you can't stream it on Netflix or watch it on YouTube or anything like that. It has to happen live.
And one of the things that I've been thinking about in relation to Sam's work is the fact that there's a very specific way that's monetized, and how you make a living out of your art is by traveling with the film. We would say that's correct.
Yeah.
So we talk, and Gary, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about some of your advice, because it leads directly into this. But the way that we continue to make work is we have to make a living off of the work that we do, which I think, now that everything's changing so much, you have some specific opinions about. Gary, you have some specific opinions about that?
Yeah, I mean, my advice in the book was, I think, mostly about just coming to grips with the idea of releasing your films on your own independently. I think a lot of filmmakers, even now still kind of have this fantasy that the documentary is going to get into Sundance, and that Harvey Weinstein is going to give them like millions of dollars and chomp a cigar, and that still happens. I mean, it does, but I've 3,000 documentaries submitted to Sundance this year, and they took 30, and maybe 3 or 4 got kind of big distribution deals. So it's like 1,000 to 1 odds, and I'm just I'm like Sam, I do make films about things I'm obsessed with and I really want to know more about, and I'll spend 2 or 3 years making them, and at the end of that process, it's just I can't understand how just kind of giving the film to somebody else to say, okay, well, take it from here. I'm off to the next project. I mean, I think that whole next phase of releasing your film, touring with it, and having that kind of direct relationship with your audience via the web or in person, is a huge part of the filmmaking process. I mean, I still consider that part of filmmaking. It's all one thing, because that you going out and showing the film and selling posters and getting it up online or getting a Netflix deal or whatever, all the little things you do, that's enabling you to make your next movie. And for me, that's the most important thing. I just want to make the next movie and pay the rent. So that's all I'm kind of focused on. And it seems like the reality now is that that's the way that 99% of the films out there are going to get distributed. So just kind of embrace that fact and don't kind of go, oh God, I got to put out my film myself. Well, that's really the only way it's going to happen for 99% of the filmmakers out there. And even if you're not going to do it yourself, knowing the kind of the process of how a film is released is going to help you, even if somebody else is doing the kind of heavy lifting. And even if you do get a distribution deal, you're not going to be like in the Bahamas or something while this is happening. You're still going to be going to the screenings and doing Q&As and press and working it. So I just think that, my advice in the book was very much about just like embrace that process and get involved, and don't be afraid of that idea that you're going to release your film yourself or through your own company, and you're going to have help and friends and other companies that you partner with, but you're not going to get this golden, you're not going to win the lottery. Don't get into this to win the lottery.
Also, I always think that part is really fun, the being out there in the world with your movie. Sometimes people who get distribution and the distributor just sort of takes the movie away, I think that would be terrible to not be involved.
Yeah. Well, it's like the other thing I think, and I'm sure Chris and Penny and Al can attest to this. It's a long-term thing. This like a career in documentary, and one of the things you want to have is control of all your past films. You want to build up a library, a body of work, because there's always going to be new technologies and new ways of getting films out there. And if you have the rights to all your films, well, you can take advantage of those things. So, I'm kind of a zealot about independently funding my films and independently releasing them, and not signing the rights away for more than a couple of years to whatever deal that I'm doing as part of the release. But it is about that. For me, it's about that long-term view. It's this it's not buying lottery tickets. It's trying to build something.
Chris and Penny, do you guys want to talk a little bit about that? Because you've done it a couple different ways now. Is it exciting to be able to, know that there's tools out there now like Kickstarter, which do all of you know Kickstarter and Indiegogo and all those social? Okay, we won't get into what that is then. That there's sort of tools out there for us now to do it on our own. Is that exciting or terrifying, or both?
Well, I totally agree with Gary, and thought that was really important advice that he added to the book about distribution, because we've always been, advocates of owning your own film and retaining the rights to your film so that you can control your film and protect your film. It's not always possible. It was probably possible, when we started.
50-50.
But now. It's a little bit harder. All the other entities want to own the film too, and you really have to struggle for that, because it makes it more difficult to find funding for your film if you're not going to give it away to a television station. But if you do retain the rights, and we've been very lucky that Penny has made a lot of films on musicians that have retained, their interest.
Stars.
Yes. So we always say we live off of dead rock stars. Not so much anymore, but they really, selling footage rights of Bob Dylan has, kept us going. Or Janis Joplin or Jimi Hendrix, or Bob Dylan's not dead. But anyway, do you want to speak more about?
Well, I just thinking of those thousands of cubic feet up in Iron Mountain that we have to herd somehow. It's like dead sheep when you thought they were all alive, And unfortunately, they're in the wrong format and will continue to be for years to come. So this problem, which began as a kind of an errant idea that I'm going to own a piece of everything, whatever it is, you now wonder why you even came to your mind. Because you are responsible for it. Nobody else wants the damn stuff. And we don't even have a projector. So we can't see half of it, except by doing this, So I feel I'm back at my early stages of film. Something has to be done for us. I don't know about anybody else, but the idea of archiving maybe 100 films, maybe something like that, because a lot of the stuff we never put into heavy release. After my mother had seen it and Chris's parents had seen it, that was kind of our distribution log for the. And yet, it is history. It's history, unlike acting films where everybody does 20 takes until they get the damp, whatever it is, on their soles of their feet, and then the 19 takes you can throw away because that's not too interesting. But documentary, it isn't just the final film, but it's all the outtakes are sometimes as scandalous and as interesting as what you used in. So they're all your babies, and you gotta find some way to keep them alive. And I'm telling you, that takes more work than making the goddamn things.
Actually, Gary, you do a really good job with your outtakes. You want to talk about the book a little bit from the trilogy book?
I just working currently on just a book of all the full interviews from the 3 design-related documentaries that I did, because I actually do go fishing a lot when I'm doing the conversations. Like I don't prepare questions when I go into them, because I really want it to feel like a conversation. And as a result, they might go on for a couple hours, and we only use a couple minutes of it in the film. I'm also okay with having the person I'm having the conversation with just ramble, and they can get off topic, and I'm totally cool with that, because I know that out of those 2 hours, we're only going to use 2 minutes. So it's more important for me to let them get into a state of mind where they can really open up and really talk. So I don't mind letting go like a half hour going down some tangent, because at the end of that I can bring them back around. Like maybe not a half hour, but like
and he's not shooting
5
film.
minutes or whatever. Yeah, shooting video, obviously that is one of the luxuries that we have that the film era didn't have. So anyway, there's all that extra content, and some of it was really good, but as everyone on the panel can attest to, you don't get to use all the best stuff sometimes. So I thought it was kind of a waste to let it sit on the hard drive. So I just had all the interviews transcribed and just doing a book of all the raw conversations. So cool. It's also another way of just like, it's like Hamburger Helper for a documentary. It's just like, what else can I use to make some money? What little resources do I have that are just sitting there, not helping make the next film? And that was an idea that I came up with. And so far, we had a pretty successful Kickstarter for it, and the book will come out in the summer. And I have a question for Jessica. Now, back to Betty. Since you started the book really because you had a lot of questions about making documentaries.
I really needed advice.
You wanted to get and really you just wanted to cheat and get all these 50 filmmakers and
totally
have
true.
an excuse to ask them for advice. But is there advice in the book that you have used for your new film? And what is your new film?
It's a little secret still, tiny secret. But I did start shooting something this month, which I'm very excited about, which you'll hear about soon. Mm-hmm. But one of the things one of the pieces of advice that I actually took away with seemed very practical, was Lucy Walker sort of quoting Barbara Koppel, but it's on Lucy's page in the book, and basically Lucy says that one of the things that she learned from Barbara Koppel while she was at NYU was that no matter what you think you're getting, you always think you're missing 99% of the best stuff. So we were shooting over the last week, and I'm doing the interview, and then of course the camera goes off, and we're sort of done for the day, and then the subject just starts going crazy and telling like the greatest stories, and I'm going, why are you not? What? Just shush! Like turn the camera back on. And this advice just popped into my head, which every piece of advice pops into my head all the time. It's such a helps me so much in making this first feature, is that you're gonna miss 99% of what you think you need, and it always feels like you're missing the best stuff, but eventually you really get what you need out of it. So that piece of advice really took me home. So we're going to open up for questions for a minute, but because I want some Oscar tips, do you guys have any feelings about the documentary categories or how they've changed?
Who's actually in the Academy on this panel?
There's a couple.
Guys are. Al, you're in the Academy
Academy,
as well?
yeah?
Yes.
The Oscar can be. You are?
Yeah.
And are you-
Rachel is.
Okay, so just Sam and I, these guys actually got to vote, or are getting to vote on it,
Just for them.
on the Oscar pool. So wait, you can't really even talk, can you talk?
Can you talk? You can't talk.
You can't say who you voted for.
You can't say, you don't have to, but do you any opinions about the category in general? Because it's changed a lot for those
Okay, I'll make this simple.
prognosticators.
Who should win and who will win?
Okay, that's good. That's good.
But the question I have is, do you want the Oscar or does the distributor want and need the Oscar? And if he doesn't, do you care? Ask yourself about
the
this.
filmmaker?
Does the filmmaker care? I mean,
Winning doesn't, I think once you get the nomination, winning's irrelevant.
been nice
You
to be
get 6
nominated.
months on the nomination and 15 minutes on the goddamn statue.
And what do you really do with the statue anyway? I mean, all right. I guess we're not getting any tips here, you guys. You're-
Okay, I'll
You do yours, Gary.
Trouble with the statue.
I'll do my what should win and what will win. What should win, I think, is the act of killing. And I think what will win is 20 Feet from Stardom.
Ooh.
And I think it's
What do you
because
think will
it's
20 feet.
now, and when did it change? When did the voting change so that the whole Academy
2 years
gets to
ago.
vote on
2 years.
documentaries?
This is the second year.
Second year. So now, previous to the 2 years ago, only documentary filmmakers got to vote on the winner of the documentary category once the 5 nominees were chosen. But now they've opened it up to the entire body. So lighting people and actors.
No, they always got to vote.
They always got to vote on
They
the
always got
pod.
to vote. They had
they
to
had
have
to-
seen
they
them.
had to go to a
Now
screening.
Now everybody's getting them, so there'll probably more people will vote.
Got it.
But it's really how they got nominated that really.
Yeah, but it's
You know?
it's when it turns into kind of a bigger pool of people that aren't necessarily documentary filmmakers. I think it's always the kind of more popular, uplifting kind of films that end up winning. The more crowd pleasing films, and I think 20 Feet from Stardom is just that kind of film. It's,
But-
what?
Here we go.
The squares.
The square's coming in.
I think the square.
Dark
I think it's
horse.
neck and neck.
Dark horse in the running.
Yes.
A
I
lot
think.
of publicity.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, the publicity's been insane. Yeah.
well, because Netflix really wants to win an Oscar. I mean, that's their thing.
I've never seen a documentary advertised in the subway. No,
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
I know.
And that's Netflix's big thing. With it's like Netflix going after the Emmys and the Golden Globes
They've got
with
something
their
to
with their
prove now.
original
Yeah. It's
series.
great for Jahan. It's
yeah.
great, you know.
Yeah. True.
And it's a terrific movie.
So I think we can open it up to some questions. I think there's a microphone somewhere, or my microphone.
This is like if you need advice.
Yeah,
on
please raise
something,
your hand if you'd
throw
like
it
to
out
ask the
there.
panel a question tonight. All right.
I had to go first. Well, gee, it's really an honor to be here with all of you guys. I teach a documentary class at the School of Visual Arts, and one of the, all of your films are up there. But we always talk about the war room, and there's one specific scene that always generates discussion, which is towards the beginning, everything's kind of light and fun, and you're in the motel room, you're behind the scenes with Clinton and his gang, and then the phone rings, and suddenly he hushes the room, and it's the most brilliant edit in the movie, I think, because you cut from him, a close-up of him suddenly being very serious to Jennifer Flowers and the shit has hit the fan.
Right.
And the discussion we always have is who was really on the phone. What was it Hillary asking about the dry cleaning, or was it somebody actually telling him, hey, there's this press conference happening, and and does it matter in terms
We'll
of
never know,
storytelling?
will we?
No, and that's what I always tell them.
Never
Only
tell.
the filmmakers
We'll never know.
Yeah.
Only the filmmakers know.
It's the same old question. Who was when Janice was singing?
Janis Joplin?
Yeah, and what's the fat one?
Cass Elliot.
Cat Elliot. When did she say wow? And the other day, when we had a screening of it, somebody actually asked me the question again. And I don't remember what, she said, wow. That's all I could tell she was going to say wow, and I filmed her when she said it. I have no idea when she said it. And it kind of doesn't matter to me, but maybe that's a distortion of something. But it was in the air somehow, and so it seemed to me fair play. But sometimes when you're filming, especially when you're on stage and a lot of shit's going on, you don't remember what you were filming when you filmed it. It's in, you think, well, it's in the camera, I got it, I don't worry about it anymore.
Well, there's an essential truth there, I think.
Well, it is. Is there? Well, you know, we were so concerned. This is the first. Monterey was the first film I'd ever done with anybody else. Always up to then, I'd shot all my films I'd made by myself, pretty much. And so we went out there. I had no idea how to direct such a film, or even how to make it. But I thought everything should be in sync, because we couldn't have made that film before we were able to borrow the Beach Boys 8-tracks, which we could put a sync track on, and our cameras, which were homemade, were sync if they held up, which wasn't sure at all. But the fact is that in going to do this thing, we put a Nagra, a sound person, with every camera, even though when you shoot concerts, it's all flies on the wall, you know, you hardly even think about it twice. But we wanted every shot to have at least a sync track to go with it, so we know when it happened, because maybe it would matter. It turned out it didn't matter a lot. But the few times I did it, I was so proud of, I kept telling everybody, look what we've done. And they said, yeah. You know, but I could see that that you go a little beyond what you need to do in order to preserve the sort of the Flaherty idea of truth. I mean, truth is an alligator, but when, you know? So it's a funny problem. And over the years, I must say, I don't spend a lot of time in guilt, you know. If it kind of feels true, and you haven't violated something or made somebody a shit when you didn't need to, I kind of don't. That doesn't seem to me as important a rule as I initially thought it was. Everybody here may disagree with me.
I agree.
Throw tomatoes, and I don't know, but that's all right.
If you don't,
Classes have been primarily on your side.
Right, okay.
90%.
I mean, also, you know, it's just, you know, it's editing. I mean, it's you want to make a dramatic move to the next scene, or where you're going to go next and next and next, and you want to kind of surprise people and take people somewhere else, and, you know, that's really what that cut was about.
I mean, I always wanted.
I think we should respect the notion that there's an exception to every rule, and that gives you that extra freedom to do what's right.
To be the Mr. Exception.
Yeah.
But you know, I always wanted my films to be like theater, like stage performance, in which nobody tells you anything. You have to figure it out, and it's up to the actors, who you know are not the real people. But if it works, it does work. In your head, you've seen something that's real and it really matters, and it's all done on a fake stage with fake scenery and fake people. And I think, given that, if you can, with your camera, if you can watch people say their lines to each other, not to you, I think you can come close to that theatrical presentation. And what I absolutely think, and I don't know why, I've never studied theater or anything else, I think people love theater because they believe what they see really happened in front of them. And it happened on a stage with actors, but they believe they saw it, and they heard it and listened. And I think that's the reality that for me, film really should do.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions out there for our panel tonight? Yeah, one out this way.
Hey guys, you guys kind of touched on briefly about kind of how much easier it is now in like digital filmmaking ages, and I kind of feel like I've been reading like a lot of these op-ed pieces about how, you know, it's kind of like that overall philosophical cinematic question of like, is it better that it's easier to make films versus that? And I feel like I've also read a lot of pieces about specifically documentary films kind of prospering from digital filmmaking, and I think it kind of goes both ways, and I just want to know if you guys felt the same way, or if maybe is it just kind of like social media hyperbole, kind of like this is the best because this is what we're seeing now. And I just want to see what you guys' thoughts were on digital filmmaking influencing documentary.
What's digital?
I'd nominate Gary to.
Well, no, I mean,
I'm a
I
little
just,
confused.
I was not a
Oh, I
filmmaker.
understand that, but the process is not different, is it?
Yes.
It is?
You're not shooting film.
No, I mean, Shakespeare wrote it in longhand, and now somebody types it, but it's the same process, right? You're putting something on a stage, and people are pay to watch it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that the economic side of it, like I was saying before, letting people talk and knowing that I'm not going to use it, but just letting it roll is probably a luxury that's easier to afford in the digital age than the film age. I produced a documentary about the band Wilco called "I'm Trying to Break Your Heart." It was the first film that I was involved in 12 years ago. And we shot that on Super 16. And it was supposed to be a 3-week shoot, just documenting the band recording a record. But then it turned into an 18-month shoot when they turned the record in and the label refused it and dropped them, and then everything that went on after that. So it ended up costing, multiple times what we thought the initial budget was, just because we were continuing to shoot on film. We were shooting 3-camera concert shoots and all kinds of stuff. So and it really would have bankrupted us had the film not done really well, because we had just put every cent we had into it. Now that's less of a concern. It's less of a factor. Like how long you're going to shoot. Obviously, there's still labor involved and there's still hard drives. But it is a little bit different. I think that's the only, from a production standpoint, the only difference that I see. It's the luxury of being able to shoot and let things run a little longer. And even though, I don't know what the ratio is of stuff that you shoot to what you use. For every filmmaker, it's different. But I know for me, it's pretty high. And obviously, on the other side of like releasing films, digital technology has completely revolutionized what we do. That's a whole other side of it. But I think your question was kind of more on the production.
I've switched a long time ago to digital, and I haven't had to change my method of filming one bit. It's still an operation of love, right from the very beginning. When I meet somebody about to film them, they look at me and I look at them, and they see something in my eyes where they can trust me. I'm very good at getting access, but that's more important even than whether it's film or digital. Sure, digital will allow us to make films that we couldn't afford to make because it's so much cheaper. And I think that the cameras, some of them at least, are more sensitive to light than with the usual high-speed film. This, that, and the other. But the basic thing is your love for the subject, and the love that you give them is returned for the love that people feel when they see them on the screen.
Time for one more down front.
And if you believe in luck, why would you turn the camera off?
My question's actually sort of like piggybacking on what you just said about trust, and like, I guess like I've never made a documentary film or anything, but I like watching documentary films that are on people that maybe aren't necessarily like good in front of a camera typically or whatever. And could you expand on like getting people to trust you, and I mean, is it really just that it's in your eyes, or is there other stuff that you do to get them to trust you?
It's the glasses.
Half of
He
it
pays them off.
Right, it's $1 million.
half of it is that once you start filming, they consciously and unconsciously see that, oh, that's it, that's good, yeah, that's what I like that, yeah. So that what you're filming helps to give that trust, if you can be trusted.
I also think a lot of my own personal opinion is a lot of good documentaries, strong films come out of relationships between the subject and the filmmaker, and you don't ever see that in a way, but you see it in the material. And without those kinds of relationships, you wouldn't get strong or striking or revealing or engaging material, I think. So trust is synonymous with relationships in some ways.
Does everybody think you have to like the person that you're making the film about?
No, my
the
mother used to say there's good in everybody. So that allows me
I'm
to
looking
film
for the
this-
good part.
that film-
I'm
that
having a
allows
hard
me to
time
film-
finding it, but I'm looking.
I think it's really hard if you hate the person.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I don't think you have to love them.
People ask me if I love Helvetica when I started the film, and
The font.
if I was really like a Times New Roman kind of guy, but you know, I was pretty neutral about it, really.
I loved it too, I have to tell you. It's one of my favorite films.
Thanks, Ben.
Well, wonderful. Thank you guys all for coming out tonight. Special thanks on behalf of the Strand for Jessica for helping us to put the panel together. We still have copies of Tell Me Something available at the back of the room, and it is at the end of its first printing. So if you're interested in getting one, I'd recommend doing it tonight.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
It's
that's
only
all.
printing.
It's the last copies.
Stick around if you'd like to get a copy of your book signed by one of our wonderful panelists, and everybody take care. Thank you.